They almost didn't wake him. Seat Wallow was tucked against the window, just ahead of the wing, place chosen for people who wanted to disappear for a few hours. The man sitting there had pulled his cap low over his eyes, arms crossed, breathing slow and even. To anyone passing by, he looked like another exhausted traveler, creased jacket, worn boots, nothing that suggested importance. The cabin hummed with the steady, forgettable karakiwan of cruising altitude. Then the turbulence began. At first it was gentle, the kind passengers ignored. A few cups rattled. A child laughed. The seatbelt sign chimed on, polite and routine. But within seconds the aircraft jolted harder. Once, twice, sharp drops that stole breath and confidence at the same time. Conversations died mid-sentence. The flight attendants exchanged quick looks. Not panic yet, but focus. Training took over. One of them reached for the interphone. In the cockpit, warning tones layered over each other in quick succession. Not catastrophic. Not survivable either, at least not without precision. The captain's jaw tightened as he adjusted his grip on the controls, eyes flicking across instruments that were no longer agreeing with each other. Hydraulics were fluctuating. One system wasn't responding the way it should. At 37,000 feet, there was no room for guessing. The captain said, his voice steady but stripped of its earlier warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this is the captain speaking. We're experiencing technical situation. The aircraft remains under control, but we may need assistance." A pause. Too long to be comforting. "If there are any current or former combat pilots on board," he continued carefully, "please identify yourselves to a flight attendant." The words landed differently than turbulence ever could. People looked up. Heads turned. Fear sharpened into something colder. This wasn't a request made lightly. Seat Wallow didn't move. A man across the aisle looked nervously. "Combat pilots," he whispered to his wife. "Is he serious?" A flight attendant moved quickly down the aisle, scanning faces, searching for raised hands, uniforms, anything. One man lifted his fingers halfway, then dropped them again, uncertainty winning. Still, Seat Wallow remained motionless. Another jolt rocked the plane, harder this time. Oxygen masks trembled in their compartments but didn't deploy. Yet, his child began to tear. The flight attendant reached row 8 and stopped. She studied the sleeping man for a second longer than necessary. There was something about his posture, too still, too composed. Even the turbulence hadn't disturbed his breathing. She hesitated, then gently touched his arm. "Sir." His eyes opened immediately. Not groggy. Not confused. Alert. They were the kind of eyes that measure distance and consequence in the same glance. He took in the cabin, the tension, the fear, the trembling hands gripping armrests, in less than a heartbeat. "Yes," he said quietly. The attendant swallowed. The captain asked if there are any combat pilots on board. He looked at her for a long moment. Not proud. Not reluctant. Just thoughtful. Then he glanced toward the front of the plane, toward the sealed cockpit door, toward whatever problem was unfolding beyond it. And slowly, deliberately, he unbuckled his seatbelt. The click of the seatbelt sounded louder than it should have. The man in Wallow stood, steady despite the aircraft's uneven motion. He didn't stretch. Didn't rush. He simply adjusted the brim of his cap and followed the flight attendant into the aisle. Nearby passengers watched him with a mixture of hope and disbelief, as if they weren't sure whether to trust the calm he carried so effortlessly. As they moved forward, another shudder ran through the fuselage. The overhead bins rattled. A low murmur rippled through the cabin, prayers, curses, whispered reassurances. At the cockpit door, the attendant raised the phone and spoke quietly. The door didn't open immediately. Instead, there was a pause, then the muffled sound of hurried voices from inside. "Ask him what he flew," came the captain's voice, strained but controlled. The attendant turned. "Sir, a negatibo 15 he replied without hesitation. Later, negatibo 18 is. Carrier qualified. The words changed the air. The cockpit door unlocked with a sharp mechanical click and swung open just enough for the captain to see him. Their eyes met, pilot to pilot. No introductions were necessary. "Get in," the captain said. Inside, the cockpit was a controlled storm. Lights blinked. Alerts chimed and then cut off, replaced by others. The first officer worked through checklist, jaw clenched, fingers moving fast but precise. "What's failing?" the man from Wallonie asked, already stepping forward, already reading the instruments as if he'd never left the seat. "Primary hydraulics are degrading," the captain said. "We've isolated one system, but response is lagging. She's heavy and we're losing authority on roll." The man nodded once. "Weather below?" "Clear enough. Crosswind picking up." He exhaled slowly, eyes never leaving the panel. "You've got time," he said. "But not much margin." Another alarm sounded, short, insistent. The first officer looked over. "You sure you're good to help?" The man's hands rested lightly on the yoke, not taking control, yet, but ready. "Didn't get up because I was sure," he said calmly. "I got up because I've been here before." The captain studied him for half a second longer, then shifted his seat slightly, making room. "All right," he said. "Talk me through it, T." The aircraft lurched again, more violently this time, dropping several hundred feet before stabilizing. In the cabin, oxygen masks fell, drawing gasps and cries. In the cockpit, no one spoke for a heartbeat. Then the man from Wallonie leaned in, voice low and steady, cutting through the alarms. "Let's stop chasing the failure," he said. "Leva the airplane first." And as the jet began its slow, uncertain descent, the man's hands finally closed around the controls, just as another warning light flashed, one the captain had hoped he wouldn't see. The new warning light pulsed amber, then red. The captain felt it before he fully processed it, the subtle change in resistance through the controls, the way the aircraft no longer answered with the same confidence. Years of muscle memory told him what the instruments were only beginning to confirm. They were running out of options. The man from Wallonie didn't react outwardly. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in fear but in calculation. He adjusted the trim in small, almost imperceptible increments, feeling for balance rather than forcing it. "Don't fight it," he said. "She'll tell you what she can still do." The first officers wallowed. "We're losing secondary pressure too." "Not losing," the man corrected. "Bleeding. Different problem." Another jolt rippled through the aircraft, but this time the nose didn't drop as sharply. The man had anticipated it, countering gently, keeping the wings level through feel more than sight. The captain watched, equal parts relief and disbelief. "You've flown damaged jets before." "Yes," the man replied. "On worse days. In worse places." Below them, the city lights came into view through breaks in the cloud layer, distant and indifferent. Runways blinked like thin promises. Air traffic control crackled through the radio, voices tight but professional, clearing airspace, moving other flights out of the way. "You're heavy and asymmetrical," the man said. "We need to plan like she won't forgive mistakes." He reached forward, not touching switches yet, but tracing paths with his finger. "What's your fuel state?" "Enough for one approach. Maybe two if we're careful." "Then we don't miss the first." Another alarm, this one sharper, more urgent. The first officer's hand froze over the checklist. "Captain," he said quietly, "flight control computer just dropped offline." For the first time, the cockpit went completely silent. The man from Wallonie closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in focus. When he opened them, his voice was steady. All right, he said. That changes things. He finally took the yoke fully, easing pressure, letting the aircraft settle into a narrow, fragile envelope. We're flying old school now, he continued. No automation. No safety nets. Just airspeed, attitude, and trust. The captain nodded slowly, understanding exactly what that meant. From the cabin came a distant sound, metal flexing, the uneasy groan of a machine pushed beyond comfort. Passengers clutched masks, hands, memories. The man from Wallonie glanced at the altimeter, then toward the runway lights growing larger ahead. Captain, he said, calm as ever, when tell you to take it back, you take it without hesitation. The captain frowned. I love you with I. Because, the man interrupted gently, there's the point where this stops being about saving the plane and starts being about giving it to you in one piece. Another warning light flashed, one neither pilot liked to see. And the man from Wallonie adjusted his grip, already preparing for something he hadn't yet said out loud. The runway filled the windshield now, no longer an abstract destination, but narrow strip of light framed chaos, darkness and wind. The aircraft shuddered again, harder this time, deep vibration that traveled through the yoke and straight into the man's hands. He felt it immediately, the way a pilot feels the onset of something going wrong before any gauge dares to admit it. There, he said quietly. You feel that? The captain nodded. She's fighting us. She's warning us, the man corrected. Different thing. The airspeed needle wavered, dipped, then steadied, barely. The crosswind clawed at the fuselage, trying to twist the aircraft off its approach. The first officer called out numbers, his voice tight but disciplined, anchoring the moment in procedure. 5,000 feet. Slight drift left. I've got it, the man said. His inputs were minimal, almost invisible, but the plane responded, grudgingly, like a tired animal that still trusted a familiar hand. Another alarm chimed, then cut out mid-tone. The man frowned. That shouldn't have stopped. The captain leaned closer to the panel. We just lost redundancy on the left actuator. Silence again, but heavier now. The man exhaled slowly through his nose. All right. Then we commit. To what? The first officer asked. To flying her imperfect, he replied. No corrections we don't absolutely need. Every move costs us something now. The runway lights grew larger, faster. Too fast. The man eased back, just a touch. Power back. Not much. The engines responded unevenly. The left lagged. The nose yelled. Easy, he murmured, more to the plane than the people around him. Easy. From the cabin came a muffled sirrh as another jolt knocked loose items against seatbacks. Somewhere behind them, a child screamed, then fell silent. The man glanced once at the clock. Then once more at the runway threshold. We're high, the captain said. I know. And fast. I know. The man adjusted the approach, not tease the book, not tia simulation, but give instinct honed in places where runways were optional and survival wasn't. Captain, he said calmly, when we cross the numbers, I'll need you ready. For what? For the moment she stops listening to me. The captain's jaw tightened. You're talking like you expect that. I'm talking like I've met it before. The aircraft descended through the final 1,000 feet. Wind gusted hard from the right, pushing them off center line. The man corrected, but slower now, conserving what little authority remained. The ground rushed closer. 800, the first officer called. A sudden, sharp vibration rattled the cockpit, different from before. More violent. More final. The man stiffened. That's not turbulence, he said. What is it? The captain asked. The man didn't answer immediately. His eyes locked on the controls, his hands tightening just enough to matter. Then he spoke, voice low, measured, unmistakably serious. That, he said, is the last warning she's going to give us. The vibration deepened, no longer a tremor but grinding pulse that thudded through the cockpit like a heartbeat gone wrong. The man from Wallow adjusted his breathing first, slow, deliberate, before he adjusted anything else. "Captain," he said evenly, "look at the yaw. Don't chase it, T." The captain forced himself to loosen his grip. "She's pulling right." "I know." "Let her," the man replied. "If you fight her now, she'll take more than she gives back." The runway lights swayed in the windshield, not dramatically, just enough to make every correction feel dangerous. The wind howled louder as they dropped lower, the aircraft no longer slicing cleanly through the air but negotiating with it. 600 feet, the first officer called, voice taut. The man nodded once. "All right. We're inside the envelope now." Another warning tone blared, continuous this time. "Stall margin decreasing," the first officer said. "I see it," the man replied. "Ignore the noise. Watch the air." He eased the nose down a fraction, so small it barely registered, then added a whisper of power. The plane responded sluggishly, but it responded. "Good," he murmured. "That's good." The captain glanced at him. "You sound like you're talking to two-person." The man didn't look away from the windshield. "After a while, you stop pretending they're just machines." The runway threshold rushed toward them now, the painted numbers sharp and unforgiving. The crosswind surged again, harder than before, slamming into the fuselage. The aircraft lurched violently to the left. The captain gasped. "We're losing centerline." "I know," the man said, already countering, but not fully. "If I correct all the way, we won't have anything left." The first officer's knuckles were white around the checklist. 500. The man leaned slightly forward, eyes narrowing. "All right. Here's the part he didn't want." "What part?" the captain asked. "The part where we choose what to save." Another shudder ripped through the aircraft, metal flexing, protesting. His new light flashed, then stayed on. The captain stared. "Landing gear, we just lost confirmation on the right side." The words hung in the air. The man's jaw tightened, not in fear, but resolve. "Doesn't mean it's gone," he said. "Just means we can't trust the answer." 400, the first officer called. The runway filled the windshield edge to edge now. No room. No time. The man loosened one hand from the controls and pointed, steady, deliberate. "When I say now," he said quietly, "you're going to take over and do exactly what I tell you. Not early. Not late." The captain swallowed. "And you?" The man's eyes flicked once to the side window, toward the wing, the dark, the unknown. "I'll be busy making sure she gives you the chance." Another violent gust slammed them sideways. 300. The man from Wallow tightened his grip again, every muscle coiled, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "Captain," he said, "listen very carefully, because the next 30 seconds are going to decide whether anyone ever knows how close this really was." The wind hit them again, harder, sharper, forcing the nose to yaw just as the runway lights flared brighter through the windshield. 300, the first officer repeated, barely louder than if breath. The man from Wallow didn't look at the altimeter. He felt it, the pressure in the yoke. The way the aircraft resisted, then yielded, then resisted again. He adjusted his grip, not tightening, not loosening, matching it. "All right," he said calmly. "Here's what's happening." The captain leaned in, every sense sharpened. "I'm listening." "She wants to roll right on touchdown," the man continued. "If she does, that gear, confirmed or not, won't forgive us." Another shudder ran through the fuselage, accompanied by a hollow metallic groan that made the first officer flinch. 250, he called. The man nodded once. So we don't let her roll. We let her slide. The captain's eye snapped to him. You're suggesting a partial crab on landing. I'm suggesting the only way she survives this, the man replied evenly. It won't be pretty. It will be controlled. The runway threshold rushed beneath them now. The light streaked slightly as the crosswind surged again, pushing them off alignment. Correcting, the captain said instinctively. No, the man said sharply, his first edge of command. Not yet. Wait. The captain froze, muscles screaming to react. Now, the man said softly. The correction came, small, precise. The aircraft responded with a reluctant shudder but stayed within limits. For a brief moment, everything aligned. 200, the first officer said. The man's voice dropped even lower. When I say take it, you don't hesitate. You don't second guess. You does at the landing you already know how to guess. And you, the captain asked again. I'll make sure she doesn't surprise you. Another alarm sounded, then cut out abruptly, as if the system itself had given up trying to be heard. The ground was close now. Uncomfortably close. The man leaned forward, eyes locked on the runway edge, the wing shadow skimming dangerously near the asphalt. Okay, he said. Here we go. A sudden, violent jolt rocked the aircraft, stronger than any before. The nose dipped sharply, then recovered. The first officer shouted, "Sink rate." "I've got it," the man said, firm and steady. The runway numbers flashed beneath them. "Now," he said. The captain took the controls, but before he could fully settle in, the man reached forward with his other hand, making a final adjustment the captain didn't expect, something subtle but decisive. The aircraft responded instantly, too instantly. The captain's breath caught. "What did you just do?" The man didn't answer right away. Outside, the runway lights blurred as the aircraft crossed into ground effect, hovering between flight and impact. Then he spoke, voice calm, almost gentle. "I gave her one last reason to listen." And as the wheels hovered just feet above the runway, too high to land, too low to climb, the plane began to drift in a way no one in the cockpit had planned for. The drift was slow at first, deceptively gentle. The captain felt it through the pedals before he saw it in the windshield. The aircraft wasn't rolling. It wasn't yawing sharply. It was sliding sideways, carried inside the crosswind like a massive, unwilling sail. "We're moving left," the first officer said, voice tight. "Runway edge, closing fast." "I see it," the captain replied, already correcting. "No," the man from Wallois said quietly. "Not like that." The captain froze mid-input, heart pounding. "Explain." "If you fight the slide, you'll load the gear unevenly," the man said, eyes locked forward. "If that right side isn't locked, it'll fold. We let her touch first where she wants to, then we take her back." The runway edge lights rushed closer, blending white against black asphalt. 50 feet, the first officer called. The engines roared unevenly as the captain held power just above idle, hands trembling with restraint. The man leaned in, voice low but absolute. "Trust me." The aircraft sank. 10 feet. 5. The left main gear kissed the runway, not slam, not bounce, just contact. A screech of rubber tore through the cockpit, raw and violent. The plane lurched, trying to pivot. "Hold it," the man commanded. The captain held, every instinct screaming against it. The right side hovered, suspended, the aircraft balanced on one gear and sheer nerve. The crosswind shoved again, harder now, trying to twist the fuselage sideways. "Come on," the man murmured, almost pleading, not with the pilots, but with the machine itself. Then, impact. The right gear hit. Not clean. Not catastrophic. Somewhere in between. The cockpit shook violently. Warning lights exploded across the panel. The first officer shouted something the others barely heard. The aircraft swerved sharply toward the runway edge. "I've got it," the captain yelled, fighting the pedals. "No, ease it," the man snapped. "Ease it or we'll lose her." The tire screamed. Smoke billowed past the windows. The runway rushed youth in a blur of lights and darkness, far too fast. 80 knots, the first officer called. 75. A loud metallic bang echoed from beneath them. All three froze. The aircraft lurched again, lower on the right side now. The captain's voice dropped. "Tell me that wasn't." The man from Wallo didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the wing, on the angle, on the way the aircraft was beginning to list. "Keep it straight," he said finally. "No braking yet. Not until I say." The runway and lights loomed closer than anyone liked. The first officer swallowed hard. "We're running out of pavement." The man's jaw tightened, not with fear, but calculation. He leaned forward, one hand hovering just above the controls, as if waiting for a signal only he could feel. "Not yet," he said softly. Outside, sparks began to trail from beneath the aircraft. And somewhere deep in the fuselage, something shifted, something that made the plane respond just a little too late. The delay was subtle, but deadly. The captain felt it as a fraction of a second where the controls answered after he asked, not when. The aircraft wasn't refusing him. It was hesitating. "She's lagging," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "I know," the man from Wallo replied. His gaze never left the horizon line, even as it tilted unnervingly. "She's tired. Let her catch up." The sparks outside grew brighter, streaking past the windows like brief comets. The vibration changed pitch, lower now, rougher, metal grinding against asphalt. 60 knots, the first officer called. End of runway in 1,200 feet. The captain swallowed. "That's not enough." "It will be," the man said. "If we don't panic." Another shudder rocked the aircraft as the right side dipped further. The captain instinctively reached for the brakes. The man's hand snapped up, stopping him inches short. "Not yet." "We're out of time," the captain hissed. "Not yet," the man repeated, firmer now. "Brakes now will twist us. You'll lose directional control." The runway and lights were no longer distant, they were approaching with intent. 50 knots, the first officer said, voice tight but steady. 900 feet. The man leaned forward, listening, not to the alarms, not to the numbers, but to the aircraft itself. The grinding noise shifted again, changed to rekida. "There," he said suddenly. "Feel that?" The captain nodded despite himself. "She's settling." "Exactly," the man said. "She's choosing where to rest." See. The list stabilized, still dangerous, but no longer worsening. The plane tracked straighter now, stubbornly clinging to center line. "Okay," the man said quietly. "Now we help her stop." "Brakes?" the captain asked. "Gentle. Progressive. No hero moves." The captain applied pressure, slow, measured. The aircraft protested, shuddering, but stayed straight. Smoke poured past the windows, thick and white. 40 knots, the first officer called. 700 feet. The runway lights rushed youth in an endless stream. Then, without warning, sharp crack echoed through the cockpit, louder than the earlier bang, closer. The plane dropped an inch on the right side. The captain's heart slammed. That was the jeer. The man's jaw tightened. "Not all of it, T." "What does that mean?" the first officer asked. "It means it's still holding," the man replied, eyes narrowed. "But it won't forgive much more." The braking vibration intensified. The aircraft slowed, but not fast enough. 500 feet, the first officer said. 35 knots. The runway and lights loomed dangerously close now, filling the windshield with red and white. The captain looked at the man from Waloji. If it collapses, then we keep it straight, the man said calmly. That's the only victory left. The nose dipped slightly as speed bled off the aircraft groaned, metal complaining under stress it was never meant to endure. 300 feet, the first officer said. His voice cracked for the first time. The man leaned forward, every muscle engaged, eyes burning with focus. Almost, he murmured, not to the crew, but to the plane. And just as the runway and lights rushed toward them faster than anyone wanted to admit, the aircraft gave a sudden, violent jerk to the right, far stronger than before, forcing the captain to react instantly to keep them from veering off the pavement. The sound came before the feeling. Its deep, final crack, followed by a grinding collapse that shuddered through the entire airframe. The right side dropped hard, but not sideways. Not spinning. Just enough to steal the last of their speed. The captain fought the instinct to overcorrect, doing exactly what the man from Wallo had drilled into him: keep it straight, no heroics, let it die forward. The aircraft skidded, sparks exploding beneath the right wing. Smoke swallowed the runway lights. The noise was deafening, violent, unrelenting. And then, suddenly, silence. Not complete. Not peaceful. But the unmistakable silence of something that had stopped moving. The plane rested crookedly on the runway, nose forward, wings intact, engines winding down in uneven whines. The right landing gear had collapsed completely, folded beneath the fuselage like a sacrificed limb, but it had done its job. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then the first officer let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. We're stopped. The captain's hands trembled as he eased off the controls. His voice came out raw. We're stopped. In the cabin, there was a bit of stunned quiet, then crying, laughter, hands clutching hands. Oxygen masks dangled uselessly now. People were alive. All of them. The man from Wallo finally leaned back. Only then did the captain notice the fine tremor in his hands, the exhaustion behind his calm. The man reached up and removed his cap, revealing close-cropped gray hair and a face marked not teeth age, but by experience. The captain turned to him. You saved this plane. The man shook his head gently. No, you flew it. I just reminded her how. Emergency vehicles flooded the runway, lights painting the cockpit red and white. Fire crews surrounded them within seconds. Radios crackled with voices filled with relief. As procedures began and doors prepared to open, the man stood. I should go, he said quietly. The captain stared at him. I don't even know your name. The man paused at the cockpit door. You don't need it, T. He glanced back once at the crew, the battered aircraft, the runway that had almost been too short. Sit Wallo, he added. That's enough. And as the cabin erupted into applause he never waited to hear, the man walked back into the smoke-filled aisle, just another passenger again, disappearing into the moment where no one would ever truly understand how close they'd come.